Welcome to Brick by Brick. Join me, Lauren Winnett, as I share my personal journey of building a thriving real estate and hard money lending business from the ground up. Along the way, we'll explore the strategies, challenges, and breakthroughs that come with growing wealth. Whether you're a seasoned investor or aspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the world of private lending and real estate, this podcast is packed with actionable insights, real-world stories, and mindset tips to help you build your own path to success brick by brick. Welcome to another episode of Brick by Brick. I'm your host, Lauren Winnett. Today, we have an excellent guest with us today, Bryce. Bryce is a private money lender, owner of a startup lender, which is a software company, and generally a really good dude. I met him a couple of years ago, and we've done a little bit of business together. We've talked a lot, and I think overall we've been trying to help each other out in different aspects of our life. So I'm super excited to have him on here. So Bryce, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me, and that's quite the intro. I think you talked me up a little bit, but we'll see if I can live up to the hype.
I think you will. As we always like to do this, I can never give the introduction of you and your background as well as you can. So can you give us just a little bit of like how you got started, kind of where you're at, and what your ethos has been up to this point?
Sure. Yeah, great question. That's a lot to unravel and unpack in a short podcast format. But the quick like Cliff Notes version is I've kind of always been an entrepreneur at heart. Like I've been selling candy on the playground since grade school. And just like I've always been trying to sell something or have some business idea or something anyway. So other than that, like fairly traditional, like I went to college. My background specifically is in tech, but at the same time as doing that, like we've had the biggest success in real estate specifically. We started in kind of the just rental space because that was supposed to be the end all be all to passive income and financial freedom. And, we can talk about that if you want. Rentals moved into flipping and then eventually moved into being the bank and doing some private lending. And then that kind of slowly shifted into, or not shifted, but kind of in parallel, we've done that with, like you said, a software product, which, goes hand in hand with the lending. And we can talk about that more if you want. But yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So I'd say we're heavily real estate focused, but I've always been in business, and I'll probably be in business until the day I die, just because it's in my blood, and I can't quite imagine what I would do instead.
Yeah. I mean, once you get into entrepreneurship and business, it's hard not to see opportunities and really hard to imagine going to work for someone else and living within their vision, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, I can't even imagine. Not at this stage anymore.
Yeah. I mean, so I've been out of a W-2 since August of last year. So not a long amount of time. And just the idea of going back to working for someone else makes my stomach turn. So
isn't that interesting too? I was talking to my wife last night, actually, because I left my W-2 2 or 3 years ago now. I can't remember. And I remember before making that leap, the biggest fear that I had was benefits, like health insurance. And I was like, what am I going to do for health insurance? And it's funny because now I don't even think about it. Like, okay, we just bought health insurance in the marketplace and we pay for it, and it's just a normal expense. But it's just so funny that was like one of the biggest hurdles that I had to leaving my job was not even like the regular income or salary or whatever. It was just the health insurance for us, for whatever reason, was the biggest concern. And now I don't think twice about it.
But doesn't that line up with anything that's a concern, right? It's only a concern until you actually handle it. And then it's just something you deal with. I know When I started my rental business, I was terrified about, am I going to be able to find contractors? It was 2021, right? It was a big boom. As soon as I actually needed contractors, guess what? I found contractors.
Right.
And
Imagine
move
that.
Forward.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And it is true. It's only scary until you do it. And then in the rearview mirror, it's like, it's almost laughable. Like somebody gave me the analogy of like, you're 12 years old and you have your first kiss. And in the moment you are like petrified, like you were just paralyzed. And then now I'm like, what? Okay. That was like, I don't know. It's so funny in hindsight.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to take a step back to something you said earlier about the rentals and being the be all end all, because I have a very similar story of going from rentals to flipping to lending. Can you talk to me a little bit about when you got into rentals, what you found that was moved you into the flipping space, and kind of why, and I think we're going to line up here, why rentals is a good tool, but maybe not the end all be all that it was sold to us, 5 years ago.
Sure. Yeah, you bet. So the main reason we got into rentals was really just out of desperation. Like I was fresh out of college. I'd been married about a year or two. So this was probably 10, 12 years ago now, newly married, and like, I just didn't make that much money. I think my salary fresh out of college was like $42,000, and like my wife at the time, she was working too, but still, newlyweds, you just don't have a lot of money. And so I had always heard, just from one person to another, that real estate was like the way to make money. And so, and also I think conceptually it makes, it's a very simple thing to comprehend for people. It's like, I buy a house, I put somebody in it, they pay me pay me money every month. And it's a super simple business model. So we started down that road. So we bought, our first rental, and then that kind of went into two, and then that doubled. Within the first year, we had bought, 12 units in the first 12 months. And I remember looking at the cash flow, and I was like, net after all expenses, we were like $2,500 a month, which is newlyweds. That's a ton of money. And so we're like, this is, really cool. And so, I remember the goal that we had for us was like, it wasn't Lambo money, it wasn't yacht money, but it was like, I could be pretty, happy at like $100,000 a year. I was like, I would be safe, secure. That would be great. And so, I did all the Excel math and all the numbers and everything. And, for us, that was roughly like 40 doors. And so what's funny was, fast forward a couple of years, I remember looking at QuickBooks, and like, we had surpassed it. We were at like $12,000 a month net after paying mortgages and everything. And the funny thing was, rather than having this like sense of euphoria, like I just summited Mount Everest, I hit this goal that I wanted, I kind of felt like sick to my stomach. Not like this wasn't a good goal that we accomplished, but just what it represented behind the scenes. I was like, now I've got 45 units. I've got all these tenants. I've got all these toilets. I've got all these HVAC systems, these roofs. Just mentally, for whatever reason, this business model just kind of like, it wore on me. Like I wouldn't say I had trouble sleeping at night, but it was definitely a concern always at the back of my mind that it could never alleviate. But we started to notice that, and during this process, I kind of missed a couple of things, but like we had done a couple of flips, or we had renovated a couple of units and stuff like that. So we were very familiar with the renovation process. And I realized we enjoyed doing the flips more. There was more like a sense of accomplishment. Like, you take this turd and you polish it up and make it shiny. And now you have a slightly less ugly turd, that you can flip and sell. And then you get a fat paycheck of $40,000 or whatever it is when it all sells. And it was more satisfying. And I feel like it was less weight on my mind. And I don't know about you, but for me, it was like, whenever I had a tenant move out, I was like, I don't know what the unit's going to look like. And you're just like, whereas the flipping was the inverse. You go into it and that this thing is going to be a disaster, right? And then that by the end, it's not going to be a disaster. And also, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, this project, even if it is a nightmare, it sells and it's over. And then now you have a new one that you get to start. And there's still just like a brief break that your mind gets like some time to kind of have like it alleviates a little bit. So anyway, that's kind of a word salad of, starting from rentals to flips. But how we eventually moved into lending is, we had a project right around COVID time that just about everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. This was supposed to be a killer project. Like, it was going to make $80,000 in profit, but the market shifted, and we had a contractor who stole some money from us, and we couldn't get materials. I remember at one point I was like, I will drive 8 hours to get baseboard and load it up on a trailer and bring it back just so we can finish this stupid house. Anyway, all said and done, when that project sold, we made $1,200. We basically broke even. And I remember looking at the settlement statement, and our lender at the time made $25,000. And I know that he didn't lose an ounce of sleep over that entire 14-month project, which should have only taken 4 months, took 14 months. And that was kind of the light bulb moment when I was like, I need to look into this a little bit more, and hence that transition, which, we can dive into more if you want. But that was kind of rentals to lending. And I know you've got like a similar path as well.
Oh, our stories are so similar, because it was the whole thing of, this is going to be, I had money, right? That was the difference, is that I had a good job. I was making like $150,000 a year. We were comfortable, but we didn't want to live there forever. I was kind of capped at where I was. I was going to have to make some shifts in my career. And so looking at how can I get more time? And so we went into rentals thinking cash flow is the way. I needed 52 units, right? Not 52 units to live off of. And you're exactly right. It wasn't the turns that bothered me. It was the random emails from the property managers or calls. The HVAC went out. Oh, a tree fell on. And it's like all things that can be fixed, but like HVAC went out. That's a year and a half's worth of cash flow, right?
Yeah, gone.
Or those type of things just gone. And so it's just when you have, I had 65 properties, 85 units at one point. And it's just when you have that many, just by the sheer law of larger numbers, something's going to happen a couple times a month. And it just takes it out of you. And we moved to flipping just as a way to get additional cash to cover some of those things that were happening so we could stabilize the business. But I never liked flipping. It's too design. It's too design oriented for me. I am very much process. And so when I decided to leave flipping, it was going to be one of two options. I was going to stop flipping, or I was going to transition to spec home building, because I can just process the heck out of a spec home. Like this is the design styles, this is the products, these are the SKUs, like everything down to the screws, how many screws you need. And as opposed to you open a wall and, oh no, surprise, $10,000 change order.
Yep, exactly.
But the same thing happened. We had a flip, and I think I ended up walking away with like $10,000 of profit. And the lender, who didn't lose a single ounce of sleep, had like $20,000 of profit. And I was like,
exactly,
I got to move to that space, right? And
yes,
it took a kind of a different curve to get there versus just directly into, because I don't do fix and flip lending, but very similar path in that way. So as you're kind of going through this process and moving to the hard money space, you have a tech background. And so you're moved into the hard money space, and you obviously saw some, discrepancies in the industry or some inadequacies. And that kind of led you to start Lendr, which is your software company, correct?
Right.
So can you walk me through like what the first year of hard money looked like? And then what was that big aha moment that made you say, I'm going to start this software company? Because you think hard money lending, you think kind of the old school, like lawyer that's sitting there, maybe has a bunch of files with papers and, he's going to collect paper checks. You don't think software tech startup.
Yeah. It is an interesting jump. And I think it's a very atypical progression for a lot of people. The funny thing that I didn't mention is every step of the way through like our real estate kind of journey is like, I would also have a tech company alongside of it. So for example, when we started with rentals, and maybe this is like nobody cares, but when you're trying to track expenses for your rentals, I still personally believe that QuickBooks is maybe not the best tool for it, just because I personally wanted to see, like, I could see my overall profit and loss using QuickBooks. Obviously, that's what it's designed for. But I wanted to see the profitability of like each individual unit. Like, was this unit making us $2,000? And this unit over here, was it actually losing us $1,000? But when you balance those out, you're like, oh, I'm $1,000 per unit. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're winning. You have a loss leader over here that's taking the blunt of the profit. And so there is a way to do this in QuickBooks with classes. You can set it up and you have different things like that. But back at the time, like, again, I think I was more money focused and less value focused. And so I was like looking at the price of QuickBooks, and I'm like, I shouldn't have to spend $700 a year on a QuickBooks subscription to be able to just figure out like which units are profitable. And so I started a tech startup, which I've actually, since exited and had a decent exit with that. But it was a rental, essentially QuickBooks spin-off, just a smaller one where you could put in your units and figure out right away, and it would kick out, the profit and loss overall for your portfolio, but also for the individual units and see where you're at. So, anyway, like I said, with every kind of venture, I've always had like a software product along with it. And naturally, when we moved into the lending space, like you said, I think traditionally the lending space is very archaic. You do think old man in an old mahogany office with, a couple whiskey glasses and old filing cabinet. And it's not a very sexy industry. And so I naturally, when I started this, I was like, I did my first couple loans on an Excel spreadsheet like everybody does. And I'm like, this is not going to be scalable. This is taking too long. Even just like building out my loan documents, I'm like, my goodness, like I have to, for example, we would have a new loan. And so I would build my loan docs. I had my template drafted up by my attorneys. Then I would go in and I would swap out the LLC information for the new loan. So I'd have the new borrower and I'd swap everything out and I'd change the loan amount and all this kind of stuff. And I would package it up. I would send it to the title company, and then they would kick it back and they'd say, hey, the LLCs don't match here and here. And what had happened was I had forgotten to like replace the name of the previous LLC from the previous set of loan docs. So A, it took like an hour to do, and B, it was just super unprofessional. And so I started to look for a software tool that could do this for me. There were some existing tools out there, but I just didn't love them. Either A, they were kind of clunky, B, they were super expensive, C, they just really didn't do what I wanted, and D, they were ugly. And I know that last one, I'm like, who cares if it's ugly? I care if it's ugly. If I'm going to be in this thing all day long, it's got to have a sexy, attractive user interface. Otherwise, I don't want to use it.
And all four of those were true.
Yeah. Yeah, all of them combined into one ugly package. And so for me, that was like, you know what? I think there's an opportunity here. So that's when we said we're gonna build Lendr, which is, just like you said, it's a hard private money loan tracking tool. So it helps you with all the above. So it's got like document generation, like I said before. It's got investor portals. It's got borrower portals. It's got a clean what I think is an attractive interface. And I built a tool that I wanted to see that I didn't necessarily see was available in the marketplace.
Yeah. And so full disclosure, we use Lendr. We've been working with Bryce for a couple months now. And we've used some of those other solutions out there. And that's exactly what we experience, right? I think as you get into any kind of lending, there's just so many different variables that can and will happen in a loan, especially different types of loans. And that the old systems that have been around for a long time, they're so bulky. They have so many fields that in most cases you just don't need, because like me as a hard money lender, I'm not looking at, what the 30-year mortgage amortization rate is, or,
right.
Some of these other things that have to do with more residential loans. I have a much smaller set of things that I need. And I also don't want to work in a system that looks like it's Windows 98. Did you take some of the stuff that you had already done in Excel sheet and just transfer it right into there? Or did you talk to other people in the industry and say, hey, what should I build into this? Or did you start like kind of an MVP of what you need and then just build out from there as you talk to more people, you get more feedback, you experience more things, right?
Yeah, it was very much the MVP model. So essentially what I did originally, like I did not set out to have this massive software suite of tools. Originally what I did was really just the document generator piece. So I had my loan intake form, and it had the borrower's name and the loan amount and all that stuff. And I just wanted to click a button and have it pull the data from the loan intake form and just go and put it in the Word document. And so I built that. It worked great. I was using it for like a month or two. And then a friend of mine who was also a lender, he was like, oh, that's awesome. Can I use that? And I said, yeah, sure. Here you go. So I gave it to him, and he's like, this is great, but can it do this, 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 and this? And I said, no, but it could. And so you can see from there, it kind of snowballed into this thing, and it just kind of grew. And then pretty soon it was like, okay, in order to have this, we need to have this functionality that also ties into this. And then it just kind of ballooned into this, like, you know what, we need to have a full, like end to end, start to finish, like origination to servicing to payoff platform. And now that has kind of molded into what we have today, and continues to mold. Like you've given us super valuable feedback, like, hey, it doesn't do this, this, or this, but can it? And I was like, let's do it. Let's bake it in. And I also kind of have to be careful with that, because there does become a scoping issue when, like, for example, this is probably an extreme example, but and a little hyperbolic, but somebody's like, hey, I want my loan file to be able to reach out to my pharmacist granddaughter and pull this information, and then take that number and multiply it by 292 and then divide it, and then have it send a letter in the mail to do this thing. And I'm like, we're not going to do that. It's outside the scope. Like nobody's going to use that except you. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to say no. And I have to be kind of careful to like gate those kind of features, because otherwise it does turn into this Swiss Army knife tool like others out there are. And I think there's a lot of value that is derived from simplicity and just like staying in your lane and just doing this thing and doing this thing well.
Well, there's so many one-off scenarios that most people aren't going to need, or maybe one group needs. And that's why you build in, like you have API connections and ability to connect to webhooks and things like that, that allow people to create that customization that they need. So for our example, like there's webhooks in there. And so when I want to make sure all of my contacts that maybe come through an application that come from Google Ads that get entered there, they also get entered to my CRM. And so we created webhooks that anytime a new application comes in, it looks through our CRM. Nope, this person doesn't exist, adds that into our CRM so that our systems are crossed. But, if you just built that directly, like, you'd have to build that connection to every CRM that any lender uses. And it becomes this huge thing, slows things down. And it really messes up the overall architectural structure of the tool. And then it makes it harder to change things in the future because then you got to adjust APIs and overall architecture
You got it.
every
Yep.
time some change makes it. Yeah, I'm sure I feel like I annoy you sometimes with my requests. I have the tech background to some extent, and I also know what I want. And so I'm like, can you do this, right? And if you can't, then, throw me the middle finger, I'll be fine. But I'll figure out how to work around it. But I'm always just trying to like, how can I do this in less clicks, or how can I not do this and have it do it for me, right? And I think that too many people in this industry, especially like the old school guys like we just talked about, and I still know some of those guys who still work off of Excel sheets and like still are doing things very manually. The tech side of thing has to be so easy that they can go in and configure it for themselves. Otherwise, they're just not going to do it because there is such a steep learning curve to the technology, not in your case, but in other tools' cases of just the configuration. Once it's set up, it's great. But other tools, like the configuration, might take a month or two, and you have to either pay someone to do it, or you have to have some native knowledge of tech to do it.
Yep.
And I don't feel like Lendr generally has that. I mean, obviously you can go as deep as you want in anything, but the setup was very easy when we initially started.
Well, good. No, and I'm glad to hear that. But that was kind of the goal in mind, because honestly, when I build out new features or things like that, not to say that it's perfect, like of course we've got bugs and flaws and stuff like that, but I try to imagine that my dad is going to use this. And I don't even say that as as an insult, like he's not a tech proficient, because for an old guy, he's actually probably above average, but someone who is not afraid to get their hands dirty, but also doesn't come from a tech background. It's got to be a good balance of user friendly, but also a little bit deeper than just like knee deep. It's got to be it's got to have a little more breadth to it, which again is a difficult thing to balance, but welcome to business. Business is tough. So.
Yeah, I mean, business is just dealing with different problems, right? And figuring out how to solve them. That's all it is. So like for your customers that you have, what do you see as like the biggest group of customers? Is it customers that are coming in, leaving a different software platform? Or are you picking up a lot of people that have maybe never had a platform before and are now seeing opportunity to bring something into their system that would increase some efficiencies?
Yeah, we've actually done a fairly deep breakdown. It's about 40-40-20. 40% of people coming over are people who are basically coming from like a Google Sheets empire. Another 40% are people coming from a platform which I won't name, but you're familiar with. And then I'd say the other 20% are coming from another platform that's a little bit lesser known. So I would say it's about 60-40 overall. People are coming from a different platform. Other people have never had a platform before, and are, like I said, are a Google Sheets empire. And selfishly, I like the people who have never had a platform, just because when you come from a previous platform, you come with like mental biases, whether you know it or not. You're like, well, my old one did it this way, and you do it this way, or they have a ton of data to migrate, and that does get somewhat tedious. Whereas if you've never had any platform before, you're like, okay, cool. I have 2 loans out. Those are easy to enter into the system, and then we're off to the races. But it's a good spread of all the above.
Now you say that, do the Empire, the Excel Empire people, are those generally like smaller lenders that are starting to grow and they're looking, or are they just older ones that have been doing it for a long time and they're just starting to bring new people onto the team and want to bring things into the digital world?
I would say the majority of the people are 10 million and under balance sheet and don't have anything in place. We do have one exception where one group had about 40 million on the balance sheet and they were still just using Excel and everything. And I cannot even imagine what a nightmare that would have been. But I would say the majority of the people are 10 million and under, anywhere from 0 loans all the way up to 20 or 30 loans.
I can't even imagine the logistics behind managing $40 million worth of loans manually. We have significantly less than that. And we probably could get by with Excel, but there's just so many efficiencies. Like we're able to basically maintain very small staff because of the efficiencies we gain through technology and AI.
And so I once had a lender tell me, and it was bittersweet, right? The goal of the tool is really to replace basically one full-time employee. That really is the goal. And I had a lender once tell me that they let one of their loan processors go because they honestly didn't need her. And while that's sad, it made me happy too. At the same time, like the tool does what it needs to, rather than manually having somebody staying on top of all these loans and tracking insurance and sending emails and, hey, you need these documents. Like that is a full-time job when you've got 20 different loans, or you can have the software do it for you and you don't even have to think about it. And it sends automated emails and alerts, and it's got AI integrations built in that, extracts data from title commitments and moves it over into the loan file and does AI underwriting and tracks your insurance for you. And when that insurance is coming due, it automatically sends alerts to the borrowers. And basically any automated manual task that you can think of, the goal is to automate that in a way that you really don't have to think about it. So I'm with you. Like we're significantly smaller than 40 million. We've got about 5 million balance sheet at the moment. And I honestly, truly maybe spend 2 to 3 hours a week managing our portfolio. And the rest is busy building the software, because that's significantly more labor intensive. But as far as the lending company goes, it does what it's supposed to, and it's alleviated a lot of manual processes off of our plate.
Yeah, I totally get the processor thing. I think also, as one of my primary jobs is investor relations, as I'm always happy to talk to my investors and reach out on a regular basis. If they have a simple question and they can go on the portal and get an answer for themselves, not only does it improve their quality of experience with us, but it also reduces the amount of work that I have to do, which gives me more time to find more loans, find more investors, help the fund grow, which in the end helps everybody make more.
Yeah, absolutely. I once had somebody say and they weren't a user of the platform yet, but they said, does having an investor portal decrease or I guess essentially like make your investor relations worse? In the sense that you're not touching base with them as frequently. And I would argue the opposite. I would say there's a lot of value that just comes from intrinsic trust when they know. Basically what I'm saying is there's not a lot of warm fuzzies that happen on an investor's point of view when you say, I'm tracking all your money on an Excel file on my desktop. It just doesn't instill a lot of trust. Whereas whether or not they actually use it or log into their investor portal or look at their statements or whatever, just knowing that it's always there, there's a lot of intrinsic trust that comes with that. And I think that goes a long way. And that's not to say don't call your investors, don't chat with them. Like we still do that regularly, but I think it's definitely a value add as opposed to a negative.
Yeah, it's definitely something as an add-on, right? And I think it's also from a marketing standpoint, as you're raising new investors and raising new money from new investors, it helps lend a level of credibility that maybe you don't have if you're like, just sign this subscription agreement, and then I'll talk to you in 3 months. Yeah, send me your money, and then I'll talk to you in 3 months and tell you how much money we're gonna send you.
Right.
And also they can then see where their money's at, how much they're gonna get the documents that they need, and maybe they don't ever go on it, but at least it's there if they need it, right? And I think there's a lot of opportunities for that in the future. I think just communicating with them, saying, "Hey, we just put a new statement in your portal, for the month. You can go look at it if you want to. It's there, and those documents are all retained." And I don't know how many times I've sent out K1s in the beginning of the year, and then come like April, March, hey, can you send me that K1 again? Right? And now that alleviates that issue, because now it's available to them whenever they decide to get around to their taxes. The idea is just to make working with you as easy and streamlined as possible.
Yep. It's funny you say that, because without fail, April 14th comes around and I have a handful of investors or borrowers that say, hey, could you send me my 1099, or can you send me this? I'm like, it's been in your portal since January 1st. You can go grab it anytime. It's not going anywhere. So, but it's funny because that's just the nature of the business, and that's never going to change.
Yeah, for sure. So as you've built this thing out, what changes have you seen in the lending or the tech space, and kind of what changes are you anticipating that you're building Lendr towards to help streamline the process, get ahead of market trends, expand? Anything?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest change, and this is not specific to our industry, is just the adoption of AI, which is both a good and, there's some pros and cons for sure. I think more specifically in the software industry, it does bring up some concerns, because everybody is like, well, why do I need you when I can just go and, ChatGPT can build me whatever I want? I don't think tech is there yet, but as far as the underwriting processes go, the hard money and private money businesses, it's very process driven, and so I only see AI being a pro to all of that. And the nice thing is I feel like anything with money movement or transfer of funds or physical tangible assets such as real estate are my personal opinion is going to be difficult for AI to disrupt that. And so take that for whatever that's worth, one man's opinion, but we're seeing a lot of improvements with AI just from the perspective of processes, underwriting, just the fact that AI can catch little things in documents that you might have overlooked, or, certain clauses in the title commitment or whatever it may be that you just don't even have to think about anymore. I see that only as an improvement.
Yeah, I 100% agree that all that little processing work, and it goes back to, kind of removing some of that manual labor that you maybe not have to pay for long term goes into it. Taking more of the work off the processor. Maybe you have two processors. Someday, maybe you need one processor. I don't think it ever fully replaces a human, especially at the business or strategy level. But it definitely reduces the amount of workload. And to your comment about money, I could honestly, it depends on what you mean about how it doesn't replace the money movement stuff. I think that from an auditing standpoint, how many times have we heard stories of, oh, I had a bookkeeper and she was doing everything and she was siphoning money off to the side, and all of a sudden you've got an AI auditing overview system that's giving you a weekly report, and suddenly, the balances don't reconcile, and you get a update immediately that something's off kilter, right?
Yeah.
And whether that be built into QuickBooks or whether that be built into your banking platform, I don't think those are individual systems. Those are continue to merge closer and closer together. And honestly, all of these platforms, as a hard money lender, I've got about 7 different platforms that we're using at any point in time, including Lender, including our CRM, QuickBooks. They're all just going to get more and more blended together. And there's reason to keep them separate, but as they integrate more, there's going to be a lot more power in AI to look at the vast amounts of data, reconcile it across, and pull out trends.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're already seeing that. It's kind of a no brainer. And like I said, there's a lot of people who are fearful of that. I'm not so much fearful of that in the hard money lending space. Like I said, it does give me some concern running a software company because it is so easy to like disrupt that market nowadays. But like I think it is only a value add. I think it's only going to increase and make things better. But also, like people said the same thing with the adoption of the internet. Like this is going to transform the world and it's going to upset a bunch of industries, which it has. But people adapt and evolve and move, and like you just basically divert your attention from one focus to another. So I think there's going to be human intervention and manual processes always, as long as humans are involved with, unless something catastrophic happens. I think there always will be. Humans just at their core are not efficient. And so I'm banking on human imperfections to essentially keep us in business, which I think will be fine for a long time.
Yeah, it goes back further than the internet. I mean, there was people that were opposed to the steam-powered loom, right?
Yes.
Weaving loom. There were people that were opposed to the locomotive. As long as there's innovation, there will be Luddites that are not interested in improving and want to just keep the status quo. And as long as there's humans on this planet, there will be people trying to figure out a better way to do things with less energy so they can have more time to do whatever they want to do, right?
Absolutely.
We're a species of innovators that strives towards laziness.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I love it. Yeah. Same thing with the calculator, like people were terrified about that. And now you don't even blink, that you've got a calculator in your pocket everywhere you go. So yeah, it's not.
How many times do your teachers say, oh, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket your whole, yeah, I am. Always.
I would love to go and punch Mr. Erickson, my 9th grade algebra teacher, because he said that. And I'm like, bro, I have a phone in my pocket everywhere I go. I have a calculator, and it's just funny. So yeah, things change, and I think that's for the better, but it never entirely replaces. And automations are still managed to some degree. Like I think humans will just change to managing automations as opposed to managing whatever process they were managing before.
Yeah, 100%. You still need some human intervention to keep things on the track, so that it doesn't just spin off on its own, right? And
Absolutely.
maybe and that'll change too as AI gets smarter. And I think Facebook just announced that they were hiring a bunch of new AI developers, and their goal is by 2050 or 20, I don't know what the year was, to have basically AI that's smarter than humans, right? But AI comes with all the biases of the programmers that put into it and the data that it learns off of. And so being there to govern that is going to be incredibly important. But if you can get it to do all the things that let us use our minds, which to do the things that we're good at, which is innovating to be more lazy, then it'll just keep doing things, and the level will just keep moving up on the things that it can do, and they'll let us have more free time to do the things that we do best, which is, try to get to Mars or do whatever we want to do as a species.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and the analogy I give people too is like when the invention of the nail gun came out, it didn't necessarily like the carpenter is not out of a job. They just have more efficient tools. Now they're not using a hammer and nails to build their house. Now they have a nail gun. So it just improves their processes. It doesn't replace the carpenter. It just makes them more efficient.
Yeah, it's the idea of de-inflation, right? Where you're increasing efficiencies through machine learning and AI to reduce the cost of something, so that something like a house that maybe you had to build with a hammer before, you could build one of those in a certain set period of time. Now you can build four. So in theory, your cost of labor has dropped by a factor of four. So the house should cost less. Not exactly how it works, but that applies to a lot of different things. We see that all the time. We talk a lot about inflation, how much things are getting more expensive, but look at photography. You used to take a picture, you take 24 pictures, you take them to Walmart, you get them developed, cost a certain amount of money. I can take 4,000 pictures on my phone now, better quality, and they're free. So
yeah, and I was just staying in the same vein of AI. I got an email from OpenAI the other day talking about how they're reducing the cost of their credits, which is insane. Like it was saying for 1 million tokens, it was literally 2 cents. Like the cost in a world where everything is increasing due to inflation, computing and technology is only going down in cost.
Decrease.
You look at the cost of, like, there's only two things that I've seen that have like gone down in cost in the last 20 years. That's the cost of pizza and the cost of technology. Like, like on Home Alone, that opening scene where the guy's like, hey, it's $112, whatever. It's for 10 pizzas. And the guy's got this big stack. It's like, it still costs the same 25 years later, like it still costs 10 or 15 bucks for a pizza. I'm like, okay. But also, you think about the cost of technology, like, when you used to have mainframes and like people would have a PC in their house, the first ones were legitimately $15,000, and adjusted for inflation, that's $30,000 today, but you can buy technology that is like literally 100,000 times more processing power. For $1,000, you can buy a laptop at Best Buy. Like it's just insane.
My Fitbit has more processing power than my first computer, which is an Apple IIe. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
like you're wearing more technology on your watch than the Apollo missions had going to the moon. Like it's just insane. It is truly insane. And so I don't see it as a fear mongering or something to be afraid of. I see it as we've got a lot of innovation, and I'm excited to see what's to come. And also, I think people don't fully comprehend how big of an invention this is. Like I compare this to discovering fire. Like it is truly one of the greatest inventions of our time. And I don't think people comprehend how big of a thing this is.
Yeah, I think that it hasn't had a significant impact on their lives yet, but once it does, they might not, by the time it happens, it'll be like the frog in the water, right? They'll have been slowly boiled, and they'll just become part of their daily life, and they won't even appreciate it. Just like, we don't appreciate a lot of the things we have, HVAC or some other things that people would just be astounded by 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So I want to turn our conversation kind of back to real estate a little bit. I can go forever about AI because I think that the impacts and implications on our lives and business is just going to be something, like you said, it's going to have profound impacts for the rest of our lives and our children's lives. But so I know you recently, or you do your whole hard money lending in Idaho. You're from Idaho, and funny enough, we know somebody that lives near me in Raleigh that you went to high school with or something. Totally aside there. But you recently moved to Arizona. Talk to me about like where real estate in Idaho is at, what caused you to move to Arizona, and just kind of your whole premise on fix and flips in the markets you're in.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I get that all the time. They're like, "Why do you live in Arizona but you lend in Idaho?" And it's really pretty simple. So we lived in. I'm not originally from Idaho, but I lived there for 15 years, so I kind of claim that as home. And when we were doing all of our rentals, all of our flips, everything was exclusively in Idaho. I still know that market like the back of my hand. We moved to Arizona last November, and it was really just due to weather, climate. We got really tired of being cooped up for 9 months out of the year and negative 20-degree temperatures and gloomy gray skies. And we're like, I hate this. I've done it for 15 years. We need to change of pace. Our business was, even though it was local to Idaho, it was still mostly virtual. Like very rarely would I go out and look at the projects. I can look at any project in the state of Idaho and I can know within 10 seconds whether those numbers are going to make sense and the project's going to work out. And so I said, I might as well live somewhere that I like and just continue business as usual. So we picked up, like I said, we moved last November, and we still just exclusively lend in Idaho. A lot of people have asked, are we going to expand to Arizona? The answer for now, at least, is no. I don't. The cost of living here is quite a bit higher. And so we're like, I don't know. We'll see, just because Idaho is a relatively lower cost of living area. And so we're going to stay, at least business wise, we'll stay focused on that for now. The other thing is lending laws and things like that in Arizona are not as favorable. And I shouldn't say they're like negative. It's not like we're lending in California or anything like that. But there's some things like, for example, to be a lender in the state of Arizona, you have to have a physical office. You have to have a storefront where people can come and walk in and talk to you. I operate like I'm sitting in a bedroom in my house, like I have my home office and this is just where I work out of. So until we put down significant roots and we want to scale here, I don't feel like it's worth it to get out a physical office location, go through the processes to get a lending license and all that kind of stuff, where we're being very successful in Idaho. So that's probably a long-winded answer, but we're staying in Idaho for now and we'll focus on that just because business has been good. And I also think people too quickly believe that they've tapped out their market. I'm like, there's like millions of people, literally millions of people in Idaho, and we've got like 22 loans on the books. Like, I think we'll be just fine. We can expand and grow. Like, we're not even scratching the tip of the iceberg.
Do you have any idea what the market size is in Idaho for houses that are flipped and sold on an annual basis?
I don't. And I think that's a hard number to derive and to come by, because I don't know, but I think, Boise metro area is like a couple million. So, you divide that by however many households and then divide that by the number of houses and take like, 1/100th of those houses. Like, you're still in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of, potential prospects and loans. So like, I think we would personally tap out before we would even remotely saturate the market. Like, I see a lot of people who are like, I want to have, for example, we have one user on the platform who they have a $300 million balance sheet portfolio. And I'm like, no, thank you. I don't personally want to grow that big because I want to be able to sleep at night and not, I think probably 20 million is where we'll maybe sit. And at that point, like, we'll be at 60 to 80 loans on the books. And I think I'd be very happy with that. And so, like I said, I think we will tap out long before the market taps out, at least in the state of Idaho.
Yeah. And I think people that don't maybe understand lending as well think, oh, you've got 5 million, you've got 10 million. That's so many loans you could do. It's really not. I mean, you think in the average loan size, I don't know what your average loan size, but a fix and flip average loan size in Raleigh is like 250 to 350. And so you're not talking about that many loans. Even if you turn those twice a year,
Right.
it's not that many loans. And so even if the TAM is, 2 billion, which is about what the Raleigh market is for homes that are renovated and sold on an annual basis, that total sales price, like the actual piece of that you can touch is still monstrous. Right.
Right. And like, so I'm sure you're familiar with the rehab wallet guys in your neck of the woods, right? Like, I'm more than acquaintances with a couple of the people that run Rehab Wallet. They have a $120 million balance sheet. Like, they are humongous. and they are just in your area, in your backyard. I don't know how many loans that equates to, but you could do the math. So again, I don't want to come anywhere close to that because I see their operation. I see they have 15 different staff members and they have one full-time person who just manages draw requests. Like, no, thank you. That sounds like a horrible job. I don't that's not where I want to be. I don't want to do that all day long. I like being on the front end and the back end, and we deal with servicing, and we deal with defaults, and we deal with investor relations, and we do this because my day is different every day, and so it gives me a little bit of variety, and I like that. So
yeah. To each his own, right? It's just a matter of what you want. With scale comes a lot of opportunities as well, but you also are going to have to pigeonhole yourself into certain tasks. I can't do origination, servicing, investor relations, all this stuff I do. I'd have to go, I'm going to focus on strategic level stuff, right?
Yes.
And that's what Kelly does. And that's what Angela is very much in the operation side of things. And they have people that break everything down. That's just running a big business, and not everybody wants to run a big business, which is perfectly fine. That's what's great about entrepreneurship. You can build exactly what you want.
Choose your own adventure. Yeah. I
choose your own adventure.
I heard a quote the other day, which I love. It said, growth for growth's sake is the ideology of a cancer cell. And I was like, ooh, that's good. Like in business, everything is so like growth. And like, are we hitting revenue targets, and are we increasing at least 35% year over year, whatever, which like to a point is good. Like I am all for growth. And like, trust me, I'm a business owner and I want to get bigger. But if you're satisfied and you're content with where you're at and you want to have a lifestyle business that feeds your family and you only work 4 hours a day, more power to you. I like my hat's off to you, because that's what you want. And I do think that private lending can very much be that lifestyle business if you want it to be, or it can consume your entire day and you can have this massive operation. But I think I would venture to say that most people would be very happy making $1 million a year as an annual salary. I would think people would be very happy with that. You can absolutely do that with a $10 million balance sheet, in private lending. And it's not that much work. I'm not saying it's easy, but like it's a very manageable business. And so if that's your mentality and that's where you want to be, 100%, my hat's off to you. Now, on the flip side,
I think the trick is that the people that have the skills and the ability to get to $1 million a year are also the people that have the personality that are drive.
That can't let that happen.
They can't turn it off. And I know for a fact that I am one of those people that
Ditto.
Even if I got there, like it's not about the goal for me. It's about the progress to get to the goal. That's what I like. And so no matter what my goal is, I know there'll be another goal after that, because otherwise I will feel unfulfilled.
Yeah. And there's the hedonistic treadmill, right? Like you're a human being, the goalpost always moves. Like I remember telling myself, I will be happy when I reach $100,000 a year. And then like I told you, I did that in a couple of years and you're like, I still want to keep going. There's just like, you never get to a point. So for some people, you may be able to turn that switch off, but I think you're 100% correct. Like if you are the person who is able to build a business that large or reach financial freedom or whatever it may be, you won't be able to turn that off. Yeah. And it's just, you're going to keep going. But also like to quote Hormozy, like the goal of health is like to stay healthy. The goal of business is to stay in business. The goal of marriage is to stay married. You don't just like stop one day and like you've achieved your goal. No, like if you stop, you lose everything.
Yeah. You got to keep moving. Always. Yeah. I think the other piece of that though is to your counterpoint is Morby said in an interview one time, like, if you have gotten to the point where you have built a business, right, and you have all these skills to build a business to 2 million, 5 million, whatever it is of revenue on an annual basis, and then you just take a step back and stop, like, how dare you remove that skill set from the market that's providing income for other people and offering value to the market? And I can see that side of things too, but at the end of the day, you and your family are should be what's most important to you. But I thought that was an interesting counterpoint to finding a comfort level and just taking foot off the gas.
Interesting. I've never thought of it that way, but this is something that, kind of in the same vein, like Dan Martell mentioned, he's like, how dare you? Like, how selfish are you to, say for example, you have this opportunity for your investors, like your friends and your family, and like, I can make you a double-digit rate of return. Yeah, there are some risks associated, but there's some massive upside potential, and these are how we hedge against the risks. How selfish are you to not offer this opportunity to your friends and family and your loved ones and people around you because you do have this skill set? Like, how selfish. And I had never thought of it in that, in at least through that lens. And I was like, oh, that's really, really interesting. And it sounds like Pace Morby is kind of touching on a similar point, but I was like, that is very, very interesting.
Yeah. I think you start getting into those higher echelons of people. You start getting in a little bit of an echo chamber too, of very successful people that all have a similar mindset, and that's how they got there.
Yes.
But it becomes a bit of an echo chamber. And so, but I think it's important to be self-reflective and think about what you want and how you want to get there, and understand that what the things that are going to make you happy are also going to make you the most successful in most cases, right? If I have to go do bookkeeping, I'm going to be a miserable mess and I'm not going to be successible at it. Right now, if I get
that's
to
why you have a business partner.
Yeah. Or market something, right, I'll be happy as a clam.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to just find their partners that can do the things they don't want, and figure out what's going to make them happy, and and focus on how they get there. Because if you don't do that, you might as well just get a W-2 and have someone tell you what to do the rest of your life, and hope that you can buy a boat and, drink your weekends away. But not skewed towards W-2s or anything.
Yeah, no. And it's funny. So I actually had a reel that I posted not too long ago that said something to the effect of like, unpopular opinion, I think 98% of the people out there are actually better off with a W-2 job. Like, entrepreneurship is hard. It is very hard. It is very tough. And it really is like, you wake up and you get kicked in the balls, and then you go to sleep and you wake up and you do it again. And you just put on a smile and you're like, I love this, even if it doesn't feel good, And so some people are built for it. And I would say right now, entrepreneurship is like a fun thing to put in your Instagram bio. It's like a sexy topic. It is not for most people. Like I said, I've been selling things since I was 6 years old, like I've just always had this thing. And so I think some people are just built with it. Other people are not. I think you can cultivate that and develop it. But for people who think that that's what they need to be successful in life, I'd say do not be an entrepreneur. Just do your W-2 job. And if you have to, compartmentalize it, and just like, that's what you do to provide your family. And then you get fulfillment through other methods. But there are some people like you and I who it makes us physically ill being told what to do from a boss or a W-2, and you just can't. So I think some people need to realize, is this just what I really want to do? Or is this because this is what I think I need to do because of what society is maybe telling me what to do?
Yeah. I mean, and maybe the job you have is just not the right fit, and you should find a different job, right?
You may just hate your job. Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah, I honestly think that I wouldn't have gone down the path, because I wasn't like you. I wasn't an entrepreneur from the very beginning. And I've talked about this on previous podcasts. It was something that cultivated in me in around the 2020 range, when I realized I didn't want to work for somebody. But the reason I made that realization is because I got to that comfort level, or the discomfort level. There's the theory of, you don't make any actions until you're so uncomfortable that you have to. I was uncomfortable because my boss was terrible. I didn't like my job. And so I had to make a shift. If I'd been in a different role, like I'd been in my sales role that I had previous to that in Michigan, I might not have ever shifted, because it was so comfortable and I enjoyed it so much. There was no reason to look outside to do something else. And so everybody's situations are different. And sometimes the things that we experience that we think are terrible are actually some of the best things that could happen to us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. You have to have that stimulus otherwise. And like I said, that's okay. You can 100% do that. Like if you like your job and it's just a way to provide for your family, and then you go kayaking on the weekends and bike riding, and you get fulfillment and enjoyment and whatever it is from anything else, more power to you. But I love entrepreneurship. Like it's just in my blood. It runs through my veins. And I love nothing makes me happier than seeing my close rate go from 12% to 14% because I tweaked some like it's so nerdy, and people are just like, most people are not built like that, but like, I love it. And it just makes me so happy and so fulfilled. And to each their own, you do you.
Talk to me a little bit about, so you're pretty active on social media. Talk to me a little bit about how you got into Instagram, what your premise is on that, and kind of what you've seen and how you've used it to grow your business, expand your personal brand.
Sure, sure. For the longest time, and I would still say majority of the time, I'm more of a consumer than a creator. But I have seen a lot of value as of late come from Instagram, and specifically just from raising capital. We and not to say that like I think we've got 10,000 followers on Instagram. Like we're still very small, but in the last 2 years or so, we've been able to raise $2 million off of Instagram just from people that we have never met personally, and they've just become investors after seeing what we offer and what we do. And so it's a really pretty simple formula. Like I post one reel per day. It has some finance related topic associated typically, unless I'm posting, some stupid dad joke or something that happened that day. And, fair warning, there are, a couple of those, and that's just me and you'll have to deal with it. But other than that, like it's been very simple. Like my model is, like I said, post a reel a day talking about what I'm doing and finance stuff. And then if people organically like gravitate towards that and they want to see what we're doing, they click the link in my bio, they maybe come invest with us. And that's pretty much it. There's really not too much to it.
Based on following you, I figured it was like financial and then monster, and then white monster, and then financial and then white monster, and always at least one story about white monster.
Yeah. Yeah. What's funny is the people who don't know me, they think that like we need to have an intervention, like, is your heart going to explode? Like my wife's aunt, for example, she's a nurse, and she like one day texted my wife and she's like, hey, I know about these other drinks. They're a little bit healthier. Maybe you should like give these to Bryce and recommend. And people think that I drink it like water, but like I limit myself to maybe having 2 to 3 a week, but the frequency at which I post, people are like, he doesn't drink water, period. But I do love a good white monster. But also I have found a ton of value in posting something other than business related content, because it gives something that people relate to. For example, we talked about Gary Vee. He has this goal to buy the New York Jets. That's what he wants to do. And so anytime that I see any sort of like New York Jets memorabilia or swag or whatever, I think of Gary Vee for whatever reason. Anytime I see a thing of dessert, I think of Never Skip Dessert by Hormozy. Like he's like, his main thing is talking about business, but he also eats dessert and he likes dessert. And like, I'm not exaggerating. I probably get anywhere from 15 to 20 reels from people every single day just about White Monster. There's an Instagram account called Caffeine Destroyer, and they always like share just funny like White Monster reels and stuff. People send me those every single day, and I love it because anytime somebody sees a White Monster, they think of me, and maybe somewhere down the road that'll translate into some business opportunity. But if nothing else, I think they're delicious and the best thing on the planet. So,
well, I certainly associate you with White Monster whenever I see a reel about them.
Yep,
100%.
absolutely. So yeah, it's got some value there.
Yeah. I mean, that's branding, right?
Yep.
whatever you can put out there that make people think about you.
Marketing at its finest. Yeah.
Marketing at its finest. So, all right, man. So we've covered a lot of different topics. I think the question I always ask all of my guests is, if you could go back to yourself when you were 20 and give yourself one piece of advice that you know now, or go to your kids when they're like 18 to 20 and give them some piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
That's a good one. For me,
drink White Monster.
Well, that's a rule in our house. They don't have a choice.
It's in their bottles.
I would say the last 2 years or so, I've been in a heavy season of focus, deep focus, where I'm only focusing on these things. In the past, I have had multiple business and I've had shiny object syndrome, and I'm like, ooh, this seems like a cool thing and I want to pursue it all. And I've just come to realize like, you can do one thing really good or a lot of things really mediocre. And so for me, I would say the biggest thing is focus. Like it's painful to not pursue the opportunities that you see passing by or you feel like you're passing by, but it served me well. Like our software company is the biggest company that I've grown to date. Like it's going well. And I attribute a lot of that to A, having a good product, but I think B, that good product comes from focus and working on it for 12 hours a day and trying to make it better and in every way possible. So that's probably a long-winded answer, but I would say focus. I think focus is highly underrated, and you can do a lot of things if you just, I think it was a quote by Bill Gates. I can't remember if that was the original attribution, but it said people underestimate or overestimate what they can do in a year, but underestimate what they could do in a decade. And that holds true. And I want to look at this at, 10 years from now and be like, wow, we did that. attribute all that to focus.
It's really the sign of a maturing entrepreneur that can take all of the distractions that are coming at them on a regular basis and say no to those that don't work into their long-term goal. And you see that a lot with new entrepreneurs. Oh, they're going to start with flips, and then 2 weeks later, I'm going to buy some rentals, and then I got a trailer park over here that I'm looking at.
Yep.
And then you talk to the guy that's been doing it for 20 years, and they're like, I buy lots that are between 3 and 5 acres. I build 3 single family homes that are 1,800 square feet. I sell those for $323,000.
Yep. They're within a mile of a park. They have access to roads. There's no power. Like, they have their criteria
city septic,
and their
city
box.
Sewer,
Yep. And it
exactly.
is like, but the thing that people don't realize is get an efficiency bonus for having operations at scale. Like, you've done it 1 million times. So who's to say you can't do it 1,000,001 time? It's just like people don't realize.
Yeah, you 100% nailed that. So where can people reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you, talk about Lendr, which is spelled Lendr, or just talk about, White Monster?
Yeah. I would say Instagram probably is where we're most active. So it's just at Bryce Matheson on Instagram. That's Bryce with a Y. Our software product is joinlendr.com, like you said, Lendr. But yeah, shoot me a DM. I do request a picture of you holding a white monster before you DM me, so I know that you're like one of the true followers. But no, Instagram, email, I'm available on all the above. So feel free to reach out anytime. Happy to help.
Yeah, I'll make sure I put all of that in the show notes. A confession on my part is I have never had a white monster.
You shut your dirty mouth right now.
I know my 8-year-old son, if I bought them, he would drink them all because he's little. That would be his bag.
Yeah.
He is the little kid like that. But no, coffee for me. But anyway, it's been a pleasure, Bryce. If anybody wants to reach out to Bryce, I highly recommend it. Great guy, good to talk to, willing to help. And I've had a great time talking to you, and I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. We appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Until next week. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Brick by Brick Wealth Building Conversations. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people find the show. For more tips, resources, and updates on my journey, follow me on Invest with Lauren. Let's keep building wealth, one brick at a time. See you next week.